Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land that I'm recording and that you're viewing this presentation on. For me, it's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Sovereignty was never ceded. My name's Ellis Blaikie and I'm the Manager of Service Improvement and Innovation at Bridge Housing. And I'll be talking about how we've been using nudge theory as a framework to deliver evidence-based service improvements across our teams here at Bridge. I'll start by giving you a quick overview of Bridge Housing and then I'll give you a high-level rundown of nudge theory before I start digging into how we've been working to embed it across our services, including some of the fantastic results that we've seen in terms of improving our access rates for our property inspections. Alrighty, so about Bridge. We are a Tier 1 registered community housing provider operating in the Sydney region. Our mission is to improve lives through affordable housing and quality services. Bridge has been around for almost 40 years with our humble beginnings as the Southwest Inner Sydney Housing Cooperative in 1985 with just 35 properties. We now have more than 3,500 properties which are home to over 5,500 residents and we cover 20 local government areas across the Sydney metropolitan region. In August 2019, we took over the management of all public housing on the Northern Beaches from the New South Wales Government as part of the Social Housing Management Transfer Program. We also have a real focus on affordable housing through our social enterprise real estate agency, Homeground Sydney, with affordable housing properties being managed on behalf of local government, private developers and a growing number of mum and dad investors offering their property at below market rates in order to take advantage of a range of available tax concessions. We are leaders in the delivery of Housing First programs and we have a real focus on housing people with an experience of homelessness and people with complex needs. Since the first lockdown in 2020, we've housed almost 100 people with a history of rough sleeping as part of the New South Wales Government's Together Home program. We also have the Step to Home program, which we manage in partnership with Nemo National Women's Housing Company and Metro Housing, which has housed over 90 rough sleepers since 2018. And we've also run some of the first Housing First pilots in New South Wales. It's Platform 70 and Connect 100. And most of those people are still housed with us today, which is a fantastic result. We know that a safe, secure, affordable home is absolutely critical to wellbeing and the capacity for someone to live the life that they choose. That's why tenancy sustainment is our #1 priority, especially considering some of the vulnerabilities facing the communities that we're sort of working within. Now, this infographic here is a snapshot of our social impact framework, the difference that we make, and it captures how all the work that we do contributes to this overarching goal of supporting our residents to sustain their tenancies. And we do a lot, as I'm sure all of your organisations do too. Now, in the busy world of delivering housing services, staff are often quick to jump into action when a problem arises. And this is absolutely the right thing to do when it comes to responding to our tenants, particularly when crisis hits. But when it comes to addressing some of those bigger sort of complex policy and practice problems, this tendency to launch straight to solutions can actually hinder critical analysis, and it can lead us to interventions that are based on assumptions rather than actual evidence. And that's why it's so important to take an evidence-based approach to service improvement, particularly when tackling these bigger systemic issues. It starts with unpacking the problem at hand in detail to really understand what's going on, what's the extent of the issue, what is it costing us, what's the impact and who is impacted. So we've been using nudge theory as a framework to help us work through these issues and to design, test and implement solutions that actually work. So before I get into how we've been using it here at Bridge, I'll give you just a bit of the elevator pitch, Nudge 101. So what is nudge theory? Nudge says that the decisions we made are shaped by the context in which we make those decisions. When faced with the same question and the same options, we'll often make a different decision based on how the question is framed or the way those options are presented to us. Our human brains are very responsive to things like positive reinforcement and indirect suggestion, and the way these are used influence how we act and the actions that we take in different scenarios. So nudge, which is also sometimes called behavioural insights, is an approach that draws on learnings from behavioural economics and social psychology to provide a framework for designing, testing and delivering service improvements. What's happening when someone is making a decision and how can we reshape that decision-making context to influence the person to behave in the way that we want them to, essentially. So it's almost like how can we hack our own brains to deliver better services? So one of the founding principles of nudge is taking an evidence-based approach to unpacking problems, designing targeted interventions, and then testing their effectiveness. It's about really delving into the problem and understanding what's going on so that you can design a very specific intervention that directly addresses all of those sort of complicated factors that are at play. And then it's about trialing the intervention to make sure it works. And yeah, that all sounds very labour intensive and time consuming, I hear you say, or I assume I would hear you say if we were in the room together. And yes, yeah, it definitely is. But the benefit is that these nudges really work. And by taking the time to understand the problem and to test the solution, we can be sure that we're implementing service improvements that work for staff and for clients. So really, nudge is about choice architecture. How can we influence a person's choice by changing the context in which they are making that choice? And we'll come back to that in a bit more detail, but I think it can be really helpful to know what's not a nudge. So there are a few different approaches that we can take to try and influence behaviour. So mandates, for example, mandates use authority and consequence, often in the form of punishment to influence behaviour. Obviously, through the pandemic, we've seen the introduction of mask mandates with big fines for people who are found not to be wearing one. And we use mandates quite a bit in the housing space. For example, tenants must pay their rent, otherwise we'll take action at the tribunal. Then there's carrot and stick, where we use incentives or rewards to influence behaviour. This could be you buy 10, get one free loyalty card for your favourite cafe. The prize for the team who gets the best response rate for the annual tenant satisfaction survey, or our hand up program here at Bridge, where tenants in significant debt receive a rent credit for engaging in a series of approved activities. And then there's information, where we provide people with the facts that they need in order to come to a decision for themselves. So, for example, we provide our tenants with information about our community engagement programs and how they can participate at the point of sign up. Now, these approaches and nudge are not mutually exclusive, and often nudge works best when combined with some of these other strategies, but more on that in a moment. So back to nudge. So our brain uses shortcuts called heuristics to help us make decisions under pressure. So these heuristics take into account all of our previous experiences so that we're not completely overwhelmed every time we need to make a choice. And there are some commonalities that are pretty consistent across Western cultures, which is where all the research has come from. So people are lazy. We don't like doing things that take effort. Any amount of effort, even the tiniest bit, is enough of a reason for us not to do something. As humans, our default is inaction. But so that being said, most people do want to do the right thing. This just means that we need to make it easy for people to do the right thing. So most people just want to be like everybody else. We're social creatures, and fitting in with the pack is a long-held survival instinct we've carried through since not being a part of the pack came with the very, very real risk of being eaten by a lion. People love to have fun, so pleasure is motivating. Novelty makes things more fun, and having fun makes us feel good. So it's a no-brainer, really. So nudge theory it's about taking all of these insights on the human brain that we've developed from years and years of research in social psychology and behavioural economics and applying them to program and service design. But we're not social psychologists or behavioural economists. So where on earth do we start? Well, lucky for us, the Behavioural Insights team, which was established by the UK government to drive the application of nudge theory across government services over there, have distilled reams and reams and reams of research, decades of research, into a simple framework. And here it is, the EAST framework. So this is a framework that can be applied when designing new programs, processes and approaches, and it can also be used to assess the existing ones in order to identify opportunities for improvement. So EAST stands for easy, attractive, social and timely. And these are the questions that we just need to keep coming back to ourselves throughout the process. So let's dig into each one in a little bit more detail. Easy. So as I said before, people are lazy. This means we're more likely to take action the less effort it requires. So when designing our programs and services, we need to make it as easy as possible for the end user to make the decision that we want them to. And we can do this through the use of default options and low barrier processes. So people are much more likely to pay their electricity bill if the electricity provider includes a link to make a payment in that reminder text message. We're all very busy, so any slight change that we can make to reduce the effort on the part of that end user is likely to deliver some pretty significant results. So at Bridge, we've now got all of our forms set up as web forms that are automatically optimized for mobile phones and for tablets as well. So this means that we can really easily text someone a link and they can, quickly use our rent review form, for example, to take a photo and upload their pay slip straight to the team straight away. We found it's been particularly helpful in getting consent to disclose information for our support people, and particularly when tenants are in that sort of moment of crisis. It's much easier than the traditional postal method. It's a lot quicker, a lot easier, and we've just had a way better response rate. So attractive. So people like to have fun. We like novelty, and we're more likely to engage with something that draws our attention. We're much more likely to pick up the pretty brochure over the boring black and white printed fact sheet. Make it pretty, make it colourful. We're also egotistical creatures, and the research shows that we are significantly more likely to engage with something if we believe it's for us personally. For example, you get a much higher open rate on envelopes that have been hand addressed compared to those that have been printed. Interesting, you also get a higher open rate on coloured envelopes compared to the plain white ones. But we've actually found that coloured envelopes are quite tricky to source en masse. So we haven't been able to trial this one out, at a whole of portfolio level. It's just been a bit here and there. So this principle of attractiveness goes well with the carrot and stick approach too, because we're really, really motivated by rewards. And here are some examples of how this sort of principle can be applied. Sometimes it's called the fun theory, and the idea that we engage more with things that are fun. So on the left, you can see we've got an ashtray bin, or cigarette bin. It's not just any ashtray, so it's a fun one, and people use their cigarette butt to vote for who they think the best football player is. Obviously, the problem behaviour here was littering, and the results were really impressive. So there was actually a 76% decrease in cigarette litter following the installation of this very fun ashtray. And now on the right, you can see some stairs next to an escalator at the train station, as we'd all probably be familiar with. So the problem here was how to encourage people to be more active and take the stairs over the escalator. So using this idea of fun, they turned the stairs into a giant piano with each step playing a note when someone stepped on it. What a novelty. And the results really do speak for themselves again. The installation of the very fun piano steps led to a 66% increase in people taking the stairs over the escalator. We just want to have a good time. So social. So most of us just want to be like everybody else. So drawing the attention of service users to the behaviour of similar people means that they're more likely to take the action to align with the majority. So for example, when talking about rent arrears, it could be about including the reminder that 99% of rent is collected on time, which then prompts the person to recognise that by not paying their rent, they're out of the norm. There was a trial done in New South Wales to reduce missed hospital appointments, and they trialled a range of reminder text messages. But the most effective one was by attending the hospital will not lose the $125 that we lose when a patient does not turn up. This money will be used to treat other patients. So this links that sort of positive reinforcement with social norming to say that by attending your appointment, you're helping your fellow patients who are people just like you. The other great social nudge is the use of commitment devices. So people are more likely to follow through with an action if they've previously committed to it. And this can be done through the use of sort of, confirmation texts for appointments, or even just asking people quite directly. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to make that repayment tomorrow, like you just told me you would? And the last one is timely. So timing is everything. People are more or less receptive to a particular decision at different times. Send someone a reminder text a week in advance and they'll probably forget. Send someone a reminder text 24 hours in advance and they're much more likely to attend or take the action that's required of them. So this really just comes down to giving people what they need when they need it. And customer journey mapping is a great way to highlight opportunities to improve timeliness in your processes. So also on the principle of timeliness is the fact that we are more heavily influenced by immediate costs and benefits than those that will be delivered later, which is important to consider when you're framing choices. So just make sure that you're reminding people of the immediate costs and benefits that are directly related to them. So all right, so let's get into how we've been using it at Nudge at Bridge. So we've been using it for about a year and a half, and I'll walk you through some of the projects we did just to sort of improve what we did to improve our access rates for inspections. But first, just a quick note on what else we've been doing to sort of embed Nudge across our operations. So the key to our success has really been working with a Nudge specialist with a solid understanding of both Nudge and social housing. And so we've been working with Ellis Blaikie of Big Picture Training, who really is the expert when it comes to nudge theory. So as part of our nudge program, we've run nudge training for all of our managers. This session covers the basics in terms of the EAST framework, with a real focus on how we can apply nudge in our day-to-day work. So all of our staff are constantly on the lookout for new and better ways to do things. And so these nudge principles just provide a little bit of consistency just across our teams for thinking through how we want to apply these improvements. We've also maintained an ongoing focus on nudge through our team and departmental meetings, which usually feature either a nudge project showcase or a deep dive into a particular principle and how staff could apply that in their day-to-day work. Obviously, a huge part of nudge is the detailed problem analysis that needs to occur before we can nudge anything. So we've also had a really big focus on building our data analysis capacity. We've got so much rich data, but often it can be really time consuming to pull it all together into something usable. So just worked on streamlining that. And then finally, in addition to the smaller service improvements staff and managers are making on a daily basis, we've run some of these bigger projects with the support of Joe, our nudge consultant. Now I'm going to take you through a case study on how we've used nudge to improve the access rates for our property inspections. So as with all nudge projects, we started by identifying the behaviour that we wanted to influence. And in this case, it was tenants providing access to their homes for property inspections on the first attempt. But what does that mean? So when we looked at the data, we found that 23% of tenants weren't providing us with access for their property inspection on the first attempt. And while some of these escalated to access orders, most people would eventually provide access after a series of attempts and progressively more threatening warning letters from us. Threatening, tribunal action. Now, all of this work, we costed it, and it came in at an annual cost of $73,000 a year for us. So most of that cost is in lost staff time for our housing managers or our tenancy managers, who are the busiest people in the organisation. So we brainstormed some potential factors that might be at play here. These are probably our really complex clients. We thought, it's going to be impossible. We're going to need to work better with support providers. It's going to be a whole big thing. But then, we went further and we tested our assumptions against the data to dig deeper and see who are the people who are actually missing these inspections. And boy, were we surprised. These are not the tenants that we traditionally thought of as complex. Actually, the profile of our typical tenant here was an English-speaking older woman living alone, usually in a high-density sort of capital block, no documented support, and someone who'd been a tenant with us for over 5 years. And that was a real aha moment for us, because these are the people who generally pay their rent on time. They don't raise any other red flags that would make us think there are any issues. But this is also the cohort of people that we know are most likely to struggle with hoarding. So actually, it's critical that we are getting in to see them regularly so that we can keep on top of any issues. So based on this detailed analysis, we completely overhauled our letter and we developed a new appointment confirmation process where tenants are asked to confirm yes or no the day before their inspection. We also introduced a thank you card and a monthly prize draw as a bit of positive reinforcement. So we've got a $100 voucher up for grabs, and our tenants absolutely love it. Okay, so as you can see here, this is our new letter. So as you can see, we've used formatting to highlight the key information in that box, as well as some icons. And we've tried to keep it just very succinct, very minimal text. We've also got a nudge in there which draws people's attention to the impact of not providing access. Just in that missed inspections cost Bridge Housing $73,000 a year. That's less money for us to spend on repairs and providing services to our tenants. We have also used a commitment device by reminding people of their obligations under their tenancy agreement, and then positive reinforcement throughout the text. We've also tried to give people options if they can't be home and to provide access themselves. And then here's our thank you card over here on the right-hand side. So we decided to use the randomised control method to test our intervention. And of course, acknowledging that we don't have the scale or the resources to run full-scale trials. Any scientists would be positively clutching at their lab coats right now, hearing me say a randomised control trial. So anyway, but we ran a test in one of our portfolios, and essentially we split our buildings down the middle, and we sent half of the tenants our standard old letter and half of our new letter with that new text confirmation process. And we saw some great results. So in the trial, we achieved an access rate of 100% for our trial cohort, which was fantastic, compared to an access rate of 90% for the control cohort. Now that's both of them are obviously above the 77% access rate we found across our whole portfolio when we did that initial analysis. But the key takeout was that the nudge letter performed better than the existing one. So we made the decision to roll out the new nudge process in June last year. But then Delta hit, and so obviously we had to pull right back on our inspections. But since the lockdown lifted in September, I am just super proud to say that we've had an access rate of 98% for our property inspections, and that's across our whole portfolio. So we're now getting into 98% of our tenants' homes on our first attempt. And that's delivered obviously a huge cost saving, primarily in terms of staff time, but also in terms of tribunal costs. And this really is the great thing about nudge. It's all about taking an evidence-based approach, which includes following up to make sure we've actually achieved the outcome that we've set out to achieve. And we've also had, fantastic feedback from tenants who say they love how clear the new letter is, and they love the thank you cards and the monthly prize draw. So this is our first big nudge project, and since then we've applied the same learnings to our fire safety inspections. We've also made some changes to our rent review process to improve the proportion of people returning their income information to us on time. And we're currently working with Joe to review our arrears process. And again, we'll be looking at the trial methodology there. I don't have all the data yet, but very, very happy to share with anyone who is interested when we do have that data. So thanks for your time today. Just to recap, nudge provides a great framework for delivering evidence-based service improvements. The approach guarantees that they work, and the simple nature of the nudges means that they're quick and cheap to implement from utilising existing resources and systems. If you're interested in how you might be able to apply it, then please get in touch. I'm really happy to have a chat and share some of our learnings with you. There's also some great training that's run by Joe Blaikie that's offered through the AHI, and that's a great place to start your nudge journey, to just get a bit more educated about it. But yeah, my email's there on the slide, so feel free to get in touch. Really, really keen to talk, and happy nudging.